Let's recap the previous chapter. In this chapter, Father J talks about personal experience and how we all have our own personal experiences, and they are very real to us. Whether other people accept or understand, it doesn't matter because we know it happened to us. He also talked about extraordinary experiences such as near-death experiences and heavenly visits, like the one that happened in Lourdes where the Immaculate Conception appeared to Bernadette. But he also mentioned more up-to-date experiences of people like Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King. And although some have had their doubts, as in the case of St. Thomas Aquinas, it is all relative to what one believes. But as Father J said, not everyone is appreciative of change of any kind. Look at what happened after Pope John Paul XXIII made changes to the Church and some of its practices. Many people to this day still are upset about those changes. I recall the animosity because I was old enough to remember. Things like the Church changing the Mass from being in Latin to being in English was appalling to a lot of the older parishioners, and I think we lost a lot of Catholics because of these changes. But as the Pope said, it was time to open up the window and let the fresh air in. And as my uncle said, people may not like change, but if the change brings conveniences like air conditioning and cars, they don't seem to mind as much. So it would seem that disenchantment is very selective. If you missed the previous chapter and want more details, go back and listen to it before moving forward. Now let's move on to the last chapters of Father J's first book. And I must add that I am quite sad to see this book come to an end. Chapter 43. The Path is Lined with Surprises. In 1970, I was amazed at the prophetic aspect of my dream life. One of my most vivid dreams concerned 8 of my classmates who were also my closest friends. We spent our days off together each week, either skiing or golfing or playing racquetball, depending on the season. Our annual vacations were usually spent together as well. In the dream, we were walking on a long dock at the end of which there was a huge ship about to launch out to sea. I kept urging my buddies to hurry along or we would miss the ship. They shrugged their shoulders as if to say, "Stop worrying, Jay. We'll get there when we get there." I tripped over a can. I said, "Come on, hurry." I then fell over a barrel. Then there were pieces of glass to walk around. Next, there were a few banana peelings to get by. There was a continuous array of obstacles to discourage me or at least to slow me down, but I didn't. Finally, I got to the dock and the ship began to pull out. I leaped and barely reached a stairway a few feet from the dock. There were many steps that led right to the main deck of the ship. By the time the ship was about 100 feet from the dock, my buddies showed up. I said, "I told you guys to hurry." They simply shrugged their shoulders again and showed me no real concern about not being on the ship. I woke up. At that period of my life, I was recording my dreams faithfully. I remembered them almost every night. Sometimes I had 2 or 3 dreams in a single night. I was becoming quite competent in the interpretation of my dreams, with the help of my guides, of course. I learned to interpret dreams sufficiently on my own after a while. I would then check with my guides to see if I was drawing the right conclusion. In almost every case, I was correct, or at least partially correct. In the beginning, I had no idea how to interpret dreams. I did not realize that there were often several levels of interpretation. With regard to the above dream, as soon as I recorded it in my dream journal, I immediately wrote down what I thought was the meaning of the dream. To me, the meaning was simple and clear. I got on a ship which went off into the sunset. Therefore, I was the one leaving the priesthood. I was struggling to get on that ship, boarding it and went away into another life, another career. Not a bad interpretation, but it didn't happen that way. All 8 of my classmates standing on the dock left the active ministry of the priesthood within 2 years of the dream. This came as a complete shock to me since none of them spoke of leaving at that time. At least not to me. I remained in the active ministry totally surprised. My guides cautioned me about making a hasty interpretation of my dreams. so I continued to check with them, but only after I first tried to interpret the dream myself. I wanted to become totally independent of my guides, which I believe I eventually did achieve. That was their goal as well. Sometime afterwards, I was giving entire weekend workshops on the interpretation of dreams. I spoke from years of experience. I did not wish to give the impression that by staying in the active priesthood, I find myself in a superior position than my classmates. There is no better or worse. We are not competing in the unfolding of life. In my opinion, the major premise of serving God and fulfilling our purpose on earth remains the same for myself as well as for my colleagues. There are many channels of service to others, through the priesthood and religious life or through marriage, widowhood, or a single life. All are equally valid. What is essential is the dedication and commitment to the application of service. Though I remained in the active ministry, there were certain unexpected events that helped to change my values and my spiritual direction. My mother played an important role in opening my eyes to see things differently. At the end of college, we received our BA degree. We majored in philosophy and minored in English. As philosophers, at least in our own minds, we were being given profound and important knowledge passed on through the ages. Also, we were being prepared to answer even the most difficult questions people in the world might have. Besides our academic background, part of our religious training was to make a direct retreat every year. During the retreat, the priest was giving us an example of the length of time spent in hell. This was not considered doctrine, but merely an example of the everlasting fires and eternal suffering for the poor souls sent there. The retreat master said that if a bird were to take a bite out of a large mountain every 100 years and place that morsel in another area and keep taking a bite from the mountain every 100 years until, after millions and millions of years, the entire mountain was moved to another place, you might call that the beginning of hell. He literally scared the hell out of us. One mortal sin, one action against what the church calls a serious sin, would separate us from God for all eternity. Eat meat on Friday? Miss a day reading a breviary, official papers of the church? Miss Mass on Sunday? Break the fasting laws during Lent? And you are doomed to an eternity of hellfire and damnation, never to see God or enjoy heaven. There was no hope. During the next visit home, I was relating these ugly facts of hell to my mother and a couple of my sisters about what that retreat master said. Not really to scare them, but to share with them some important facts every Catholic should know. My mother didn't buy it. She disagreed completely. I said, "How can you disagree? We learned this in a seminary, and a church teaches the eternity of hell." My mother replied with perfect logic, "God is our divine parent. I am a parent too. I would never be happy without my children with me. Since God's love is greater and more perfect than ours, I don't believe for 1 minute that God would be happy either. If there is some suffering after death, it can't possibly be forever. No parent would allow this to happen, especially not God." She shook my belief system to its very foundation. I neither denied or affirmed what she said, but her response raised a lot of questions in my mind. And the more I thought about it, the more I sided with her argument. My mother often spoke with great wisdom. I marveled at her perception of reality, which, of course, was born out of the experience of life. After all, she only completed the 3rd grade in school. Her parents moved a lot between Lebanon, Canada, and the United States when she was a child. Going to school was almost impossible. My mother demonstrated an unshakable faith and a common-sense attitude. I am happy to say that much of it rubbed off on me. Her opinion about hell and other issues helped me to think more freely, regardless of what we were being taught in the seminary. Another incident that helped me to seriously question our seminary training occurred several years after I was ordained. I was on retreat at St. Paul of the Cross Retreat House with several classmates and many other fellow priests. The retreat master, Father Eugene Van Antwerp, happened to be the rector or president of St. John's Major Seminary in Plymouth, Michigan, where I spent my last 4 years of study before ordination. He spoke about some of the more recent changes in seminary life, radical changes in curriculum, more freedom in the seminary, and more free time away from the seminary. All of that was new to us. Except for vacations at Christmas and Easter, we were more or less confined to the boundaries of the seminary. At one point, Father Van Antwerp paused and opened the floor for questions. I could not hold back. I had to raise my hand and ask if St. Thomas Aquinas was still taught as a principal source of theology in the major seminary. I expected a yes answer. Saint who? He shouted emphatically. I was sitting with several classmates. We all looked at each other, puzzled and confused, mumbling to each other. Does that mean that what we learned is now obsolete? Are Hegel, Kierkegaard, and Descartes, to name a few, now the good guys? Where do you draw the line? What else did they throw out? Sounds like we need an update. The foundation of my convictions received another wave of tremors. Perhaps there is no absolute truth after all, I thought to myself. It was about this time that I began to meditate every night for many years, seeking some answers about the nature of God, the essence of truth, my future path, and the fulfillment of my purpose. I shall continue to pray, meditate, say Mass daily, and serve others in priestly ministry in my retirement for as long as I am able. Even so, I continue also to have déjà vu experiences or visions of a past life, especially when traveling to other parts of the world. Something seems to open up to what I can only call a warp in time in which the past or future is going on right now. Suddenly, what is happening is timeless. For example, when traveling in Germany, I was conducting a tour of Europe with 26 other people. I went as a spiritual director. While going down the Rhine River on a boat, I decided to go outside and take pictures of some truly gorgeous scenes. When I finished with my camera, I sat down and was taking it all in, so to speak. It was breathtaking. All of a sudden, I began to see what looks like fireflies, little sparks of light jumping around. I thought, how can I see fireflies on a bright sunny day? Then the lights started to form a circle in the sky, a large circle. A very clear picture appeared in the circle, very much like a television screen. It was a farm scene in which a mother and father and their 2 children, a boy and a girl, about 12 or 13 years old, were binding up wheat, beautiful golden wheat, and stacking them on a flat-top wagon drawn by horses. The man, with whom I identified, did the heavy lifting of the bales of wheat while the children pushed them closer in an orderly fashion. The mother was sitting down holding the reins of the horse. They were speaking German, and I understood every word, although at that time I did not know a word of German except perhaps Auf Wiedersehen. Soon the wheat was ready to take to the river to be sold to a man waiting on a barge. The area was near the place called Lorelei. When they came to the river, I could see that it was exactly the same place in the vision as on the ground. The 2 images were the same. Money was exchanged for the wheat. The family returned home to share a nice warm meal. A large kettle was over the fireplace, and the stew was ready. I could even smell it as the stew was placed in the bowl. The children were chatting in German about the work they had just finished and about school. I was taken by surprise when Al Schlicht, of happy memory, one of the passengers on the tour, came up to me and shouted, "What are you doing out here?" I said, "Al, what do you see in the sky?" as I pointed to the middle of the picture. He replied, "Clouds and blue sky." "I am seeing something else. I wish I could share it with you." The scenario lasted about a half hour. Shortly after that experience, we docked. I then surprised everyone, including myself. I knelt down and kissed the ground and went to the nearest tree and hugged it. They thought I was happy to be on land again, that I was afraid of the boat ride. Not quite. What really happened was that I felt a tremendous sense of freedom. I am sorry to admit this, but as a kid during World War II, I hated the Nazi, Germans included, and the German language. They killed so many Americans that I thought they were all evil. I never wanted to learn German, although I had a choice to learn it in the seminary. As I was hugging the tree, something inside of me was saying, "You will be back to Germany and you will learn German." No way, I thought. Our next stop was Rome. We happened to be there for the canonization of the first American-born saint, Elizabeth Ann Seton. As Americans, we had seats right up front. The day before, some of our group invited 3 German ladies on the holiday to join us. They were from Munich, and only one of them spoke English. I managed to get them tickets to sit with us. They were so delighted that they took me out to dinner after the canonization and invited me to come to Munich. After returning home, I received a couple of letters again asking me to visit them in Munich. I finally said I would. I took a 10-lesson course in German with Berlitz and made the trip. In the 2 weeks, I picked up a lot of German words. Then after my third trip to Germany, I was speaking German almost fluently. I had to. The one elderly lady who spoke English had moved to New York. The other two did not know any English. One of the husbands spoke Spanish. He sold plane parts in El Salvador. Whenever I got stuck, especially on the first trip, he helped me out. Thank goodness for Fritz. The whole family seemed embarrassed when I first arrived. They would not walk with me in public. They would stay behind or in front of me, but not with me. Fritz explained that night. "You look like a Turk." I said, "So what?" He explained that after the war, in which Germany had lost almost 5 million men, German authorities were desperately looking for men from other countries. Many Turks came, and they multiplied and multiplied. Soon they were all over the place, and a bitter resentment grew among the German people. I happened to have a mustache at that time, and with my dark skin and black hair, I looked just like one of them. For the sake of getting along, I shaved the mustache off that night, and all was well. I had another scenario take place in my travels besides the one in Germany. One in Israel, one in France, 2 in Spain, 1 in Italy, 3 in Mexico, and most recently, 1 in Egypt. I have never looked for something to happen. I never desired something to happen. They always happen unexpectedly. I am surprised every single time, without exception. Why they keep happening to me, I have no idea. With my academic background, I should be the last person in the world to experience such things, and I am not trying to prove anything. Chapter 44. It won't be long now. Our home is just beyond the horizon. I am sure every person on earth has a story to tell, an interesting one at that. I am simply one of those who became strongly motivated to do it. It is perhaps a form of therapy to reflect on and revisit one's past life from childhood and become astonishingly aware of all the different paths that one has walked in one lifetime. It is surprising to note how often the Lord has stepped in and changed the course of events. At the time, every experience seemed to be simply an unfolding of life, normal and ordinary. But upon reflection, at least for me, I can name a dozen times and more in which the divine helper was at my side, protecting, guiding, teaching, ever the constant companion. I hope that someone reading this simple autobiography of a simple priest who served his church in sincerity and to the best of his ability will receive even a morsel of encouragement or motivation to see life differently. There's always a better view. There is always another way of looking at the world, at God, or at oneself. One of the greatest lessons I learned centered on the importance of being determined, consistent, and serious. Krishnamurti, a great teacher in our time, stressed not only the importance of being serious, but also the necessity of seriously seeking one's path. He also stated that truth is a pathless land. I thoroughly agree with him. My path and your path may differ, but our purpose is the same, to seek truth. Our starting point will naturally differ, depending on our background. One could hardly expect a Chinese person steeped in thousands of years of Oriental culture to approach truth in the same manner as a kid from the Bronx. Yet each of us is bonded in an everlasting relationship with the very same Creator, who may be known by many different names and in many different languages. Before our Creator, we are all created equal, though we may not be born equal. We are God's creation, His sons and daughters, His co-creators. Altogether, we form a oneness in the mystical body of Christ, regardless of sex, creed, culture, color of skin, intelligence, ignorance, etc. The images I received during my 40 nights in a row demonstrated clearly to me that we are all part of God's life. Unfortunately, religions separate. while a way of life unites. As an example, there is only one Christianity, but there are over 300 different Christian religions. That's just Christian religions. The same applies to all the ways of life in all cultures of the world. Is one better than the other? If I were God looking down upon the earth, filled with my children, who were, without exception, all created in my own image and likeness, and I sustained their life and sent my Spirit to guide each one without exception, I would see no religion, no path, no way of life better than another. They all have the same purpose, to discover me, and to discover who they are, namely, to seek the truth. I would love all my children 100% regardless of their differences. Maybe it's their very differences that pleases me, just as the variety of flowers do. After all, each one is unique, and their uniqueness is beautiful to me. Yes, I would say these things if I were God. However, I don't have to be the Almighty One to know that from the Holy Scriptures, God's attributes are infinite love, truth, wisdom, knowledge, and a host of other divine qualities. It is my opinion that all of us seeking truth will eventually find the object of our search, the divine lover, the ultimate source who gives meaning to our life, or as Paul Tillich would say, we would find God, the ground of our being. I happen to have a strong Roman Catholic background, and my path is through the church in which I was raised and still embrace as an adult. That is my path. Your path is where you are. It is not the path itself that is important. As we discussed before, truth is a pathless land. Seek and you shall find, said the Master. Seriously, ask for divine guidance, which is always available. Open your heart, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever your religious convictions. You have a life. You have a future. Let God's Spirit touch your spirit, and your eyes will be open perhaps for the first time, and you shall embrace the truth as never before. You shall soar above your highest ideals, beyond your dreams. You have been given a promise by the Lord. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. That is quite a promise. The next step is yours. Give thanks for your life, for the hand of the Lord that has carried you this far will never let you down. Get ready for the quantum leap that comes with perseverance and trust. You and I, members of God's family, are all on the same incredible, spiritual, cosmic journey, following many different paths, but we all have the same destination in mind. We are all on our way home. I have to say that reading this book for this project has been, as I have said before, a labor of love. And as I get to the end, I find myself being very sad. I realize that there are 5 more books to read, but I don't think Father J knew he was going to write 5 more books. So he put his whole heart and soul into this book, which is why it is my favorite. And reading the last few chapters brought me to tears. When I read this book for the first time, it was probably 25 years ago. By that time, I had moved away from Michigan and started a new life in Las Vegas. And at that same time, I was able to spend more time with Father J because he would come to Las Vegas with the family on their yearly family reunion. And a lot has changed in my own life since that time. I think my own spiritual journey has expanded, and so I feel like I have a better understanding of his life now, and I hope you do too. Stay tuned for the reading of Book 2 and more details of Father J's life.